Ambassador Kehoe walked slowly toward the big speaking platform in the middle of the huge room. The Galactic Council meeting hall was so big that it could hold thousands of alien beings from hundreds of different worlds. The ceiling above them looked like a giant glass dome that changed colors when different alien species talked. The human section glowed with a steady white light, while all the other alien sections flashed with their own special colors. Kehoe had been standing in this same spot many times before, but today felt different. Today felt like the end of something important. He looked around at all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked curious, some looked bored, and some looked like they wished humans had never joined their fancy space club. Behind Kehoe sat the other human representatives. Dr. Min was their best scientist, and she knew more about diseases and medicine than most aliens could ever learn. General Taejin was their military leader, and he had fought in more space battles than he could count. All of them had worked hard for 15 long years to make the galaxy a better place. The meeting had been going on for 3 hours already, and Kehoe was getting tired of listening to aliens complain about humans. Every time humans tried to help or suggest something good, the aliens would find reasons to say no. They said humans were too violent, too aggressive, too different from everyone else. Kehoe stepped up to the microphone, and his voice filled the enormous room through translation devices that changed his words into hundreds of alien languages. Honored members of the Galactic Council. He began, his voice calm, but everyone could hear he was getting angry. For 15 years, my people have been part of this great alliance. We have shared our knowledge of medicine and science. We have saved entire species from terrible diseases. We have defended worlds that could not protect themselves. We have given everything we had to make this galaxy peaceful. The alien beings listened, but many of them looked like they did not care. Some were even playing with their communication devices or talking quietly to each other. Yet today, Kehoe continued, you have voted to keep us out of the new trade agreements. You say we are too aggressive and we do not understand proper galactic behavior. You treat us like children who cannot be trusted with important decisions. A tall blue alien with 4 arms stood up from his seat. This was Ambassador Velron from the Valkyrie people, and he was known for not liking humans. Very much humans fight wars on their own planet, he said in a voice that sounded like he was talking to a small child. Your species kills its own kind. How can we trust beings who cannot even live in peace with themselves? You are too dangerous to be given important responsibilities. Kehoe felt his hands become fists, but he kept his voice steady when the Zephyrian colonies were attacked by space pirates, who came to help first when the terrible plague hit the planet Kepler 442b, who worked day and night to find a cure when your precious Council space station was about to be destroyed by flying rocks, who risked their lives to save it. The huge room became very quiet. Even the small pixie-like aliens who always chattered like birds stopped talking. Everyone in the room knew the answer to those questions. It had been humans every single time. We have given everything to this council, Kehoe said, and his voice was getting louder. We have saved your people. We have protected your worlds. We have shared our best ideas and our greatest discoveries, and what do we get in return? You treat us like we are some kind of problem that needs to be controlled. Dr. Min shifted in her seat behind Kehoe. She had spent years developing medicines that saved millions of alien lives, but the council still acted like humans were too primitive to understand real science. General Taejin sat perfectly still like a soldier should, but his eyes showed how disappointed he felt. They had all hoped things would be different today. Kehoe stepped back from the microphone and looked directly at the Council Prime. The Council Prime was an ancient alien whose body looked like it was made of glowing mist. This alien had lived for thousands of years and was supposed to be very effective. Immediately, Kehoe announced humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. We will keep helping with medical emergencies, because that is who we are, but all military cooperation ends now. All scientific sharing stops today. All economic partnerships are finished. Reaction was immediate and loud. Several alien ambassadors jumped up from their seats and started shouting in languages that sounded like screeching or roaring. Others sat perfectly still with their mouths open in shock. The blue Valkyrie ambassador, who had been so confident a few minutes ago, suddenly looked worried. You cannot just leave like that, the Council Prime said, and his misty voice echoed through the translation systems. There are rules and procedures that must be followed. There are proper ways to do these things. Kehoe picked up his papers and organized them very slowly and carefully. "Which you have ignored whenever it helped you," he replied. "We tried to follow your rules for 15 years, but you never followed them when dealing with us DR." Min A and General Taejin stood up with their leader. All three humans moved with the calm dignity of people who had made a difficult decision and were not going to change their minds. The other alien beings in the room watched in growing panic as they realized what was really happening. The humans were not just angry or making threats. They were actually leaving after 15 years of partnership and friendship. As the human delegation walked toward the exit doors, Kiho could hear worried conversations starting all around the room. Aliens who had been dismissing human contributions a few minutes ago were suddenly remembering how much they depended on human help. The walk to the exit felt like it took forever. Every step echoed in the huge chamber, and every alien eye followed their movement. Some aliens looked angry, some looked confused, and some looked scared. When they reached the doors, Kiho turned around one last time to look at the council that had rejected his people. For 15 years, humans had believed they were building something beautiful with all these different species. They had thought they were creating a galaxy where everyone could live together in peace and friendship, but today had shown them the truth. The other species saw humans as useful tools, not as real partners. They wanted human help when there was trouble, but they did not want human opinions when making important decisions. The doors closed behind them with a soft sound that seemed much louder than it should have been. In less than 5 minutes, 15 years of cooperation and friendship had ended. The humans were going home, and for the first time in galactic history, the council was going to have to solve problems without them. Back in the meeting hall, the aliens sat in worried silence as they began to understand what they had just lost. The galaxy was about to become a much more dangerous place, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Just 6 hours after the humans walked out of the Galactic Council, the first major problem started to appear. The emergency meeting room was filled with worried alien ambassadors who were all talking at the same time in voices that sounded scared and confused. Ambassador Pyrie, from the small pixie-like alien species, was the first to bring bad news. Her high-pitched voice made everyone stop talking as she explained what was happening to their communication systems. The humans built and maintained our entire galaxy-wide communication network, she said while her tiny hands shook with worry. They upgraded our old systems last year with technology we do not understand without their people to fix problems. We are already seeing failures in 12 different star systems. The blue-skinned Valkyrie ambassador, who had been so mean to the humans earlier in the day, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Surely our own technology experts can handle basic repairs," he said, but his voice did not sound as confident as his words. Dr. Velcon from the reptile-like Zephyrian species stood up with a medical report that made everyone even more worried. "It is not just communication problems," he announced. "The humans were providing medical support to over 40 different species. Their universal medical scanners are built into every major hospital ship in our fleet. Without their knowledge and expertise, we could face medical disasters across the galaxy." The Council Prime, whose misty glowing body was flickering with agitation, had never seen anything like this in all their thousands of years of life. The humans had somehow become necessary for dozens of critical systems without anyone realizing how dependent they had become. General Mortak from the warrior Brutan species added more troubling news. His people were known throughout the galaxy for being excellent fighters, but even he looked worried. As he spoke, our defense systems were all coordinated through human-designed computer programs. He admitted they said it was more efficient than having each species use their own separate systems. They were right. Without their coordination, our military response times have already gotten 30% slower. The meeting room buzzed with worried conversations as more and more aliens began to understand what had really happened. The humans had not just helped the council. They had quietly become the backbone that held everything together. Ambassador Lyrae from the Peaceful Harmony species spoke with unusual urgency in her normally calm voice. "We need to start damage control immediately," she said. "The humans have been our primary peacekeeping force for the last 10 years. Without them, 3 different border wars could start within the next few weeks." This news hit the council like a bomb. The galaxy had been peaceful for so long that many species had forgotten what war was really like. The humans had been quietly preventing conflicts and keeping the peace so well that everyone took it for granted. The financial news was even worse. Shard Prime from the crystal-like collective species announced numbers that made everyone feel sick. Human trade routes handle 67% of all commerce between star systems. Their shipping companies transport goods between 73 different worlds. If they completely stop helping us, we are looking at economic collapse across multiple sectors of the galaxy. But the most frightening news came from the mysterious shadow. Species who were rarely seen and almost never spoke, the shadows, could make themselves invisible, and they worked as spies and intelligence gatherers for the Council. One of them appeared just long enough to deliver a message that made everyone's blood run cold. 3 hostile alien factions have been watching Council activities for years. They were afraid to attack mainly because of human military reputation and response capabilities. They will likely test our defenses within the next month. Shadow disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a room full of terrified aliens. The hostile factions were groups of violent aliens who wanted to conquer and destroy peaceful worlds. The only thing that had kept them away was fear of human military power. The weight of their terrible mistake was becoming impossible to ignore. The humans had never tried to control or dominate anyone. They had simply filled every gap, solved every problem, and become essential through pure competence and willingness to help others. As the emergency meeting continued into its 8th hour, more and more problems kept appearing. The medical systems were failing faster than expected. Trade routes were already showing signs of breakdown communication. Delays were getting worse by the hour. The Council Prime made a decision that surprised everyone in the room. We must contact the human delegation immediately. Perhaps we can negotiate some kind of arrangement, but the Valkyrie ambassador who had started this whole mess by insulting the humans raised an obvious question. Negotiate what? He asked, though his earlier arrogance had been replaced by genuine fear. We insulted them. We excluded them from important decisions. We questioned their character. After 15 years of loyal service, why would they want to negotiate with us? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Council, nobody had an answer. Every alien in the room knew they had made a terrible mistake, but none of them knew how to fix it. More reports kept coming in from around the galaxy. Each one was worse than the last. Alien species that had depended on human help for decades were suddenly on their own hospital ships, were reporting equipment failures that their own technicians could not fix. Trade convoys were getting lost without human navigation systems. The Pixian ambassador Pyrie delivered more bad news about communication systems. 17 star systems have now lost long-range communication capability. She reported ships are flying blind between systems because they cannot coordinate with Traffic Control General. Mortak announced that 3 separate conflicts had already started in areas where human peacekeepers had been maintaining order. My forces are spread too thin, he admitted. We cannot be everywhere at once like the humans could. The economic reports from Shard Prime painted a picture of complete system failure. Food shipments to outer colonies are being delayed by weeks. Several agricultural worlds are reporting that they cannot coordinate harvest schedules. Trade stations are seeing massive traffic jams because ships are arriving without any advance notice. Dr. Velcon brought medical updates that were equally devastating. The vaccine production facility on Kepler 442b has completely shut down. Without human oversight, the plague could return, and we have no way to produce the medicine that keeps it under control. As night fell on the Council station, the emergency meeting was still going. Every hour brought new crises and new evidence of how much the galaxy had depended on human expertise and dedication. The aliens who had dismissed humans as too aggressive were learning that aggression was sometimes necessary to protect innocent people. The aliens who had said humans lacked proper galactic etiquette were discovering that results mattered more than fancy manners. The aliens who had excluded humans from important decisions were realizing that the humans had been making the most important decisions all along. By the end of the day, it was clear that the Galactic Council had made the biggest mistake in their history. They had thrown away their most valuable members because of prejudice and pride. Now the galaxy was falling apart around them, and they had no idea how to put it back together. The only question left was whether the humans would be willing to forgive them and return before everything collapsed completely. 3 days after Ambassador Kehoe had walked out of the Galactic Council, the human response was swift and complete. New Geneva Station was the biggest human diplomatic and military base in space, and it was buzzing with activity as humans from across the galaxy returned. Kehoe stood in the main command center watching dozens of screens that showed human ships and personnel pulling back from every corner of the galaxy. The withdrawal was happening exactly as planned, with military precision that reminded everyone why humans were so effective at everything they did. Commander J1 was a tough military officer with gray hair and steel-gray eyes who had spent 30 years coordinating human operations across the galaxy. She walked up to Kehoe with a tablet full of reports. All human peacekeeping forces are returning to our territories, she announced. All medical teams on Kepler 442b and Proxima 7 have been recalled. Dr. Minet's research teams are packing up equipment from the joint science stations. The evacuation should be complete within 48 hours. Kehoe nodded as he watched the displays showing human ships leaving alien space. What about our civilian operations? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Would be thorough. Our shipping companies have ended all contracts with Council species. J1 replied, trade routes that took decades to build are being redirected to serve only human allied worlds. The economic impact on Council space will be severe and immediate. The systematic withdrawal was more than just bringing people home. Humanity had spent 15 years carefully integrating their technology and knowledge into the Council's basic infrastructure. Now they were methodically removing every piece of that integration like pulling threads from a sweater, until the whole thing fell apart. Dr. May entered the command center, carrying her own tablet full of urgent messages from across the galaxy. Her usually calm face showed signs of stress as she approached. Kehoe are receiving hundreds of emergency requests from species across the galaxy, she reported. Medical emergencies, technical failures, communication breakdowns. They are all asking for immediate human help. Some of them are offering to pay us huge amounts of money. Kehoe looked at the messages scrolling across Dr. Minet's screen. Many of them were from the same alien species who had voted to exclude humans from trade agreements just 3 days earlier. What is our response? He asked, though his tone suggested he already knew what it should be. We are honoring existing humanitarian commitments only. Minet replied firmly, but no new agreements, no expanded support, and absolutely no military cooperation. We help finish what we already promised, but nothing more. Captain So Young entered the briefing room with intelligence reports that made everyone pay attention. She was one of humanity's most respected military leaders and had fought in more space battles than almost anyone alive. Intelligence reports suggest that the Devourers have begun testing Council defenses along the Outer Rim. She announced the Devourers were a group of hostile aliens, known for their brutal expansion tactics and their habit of destroying everything they conquered. Without our patrol fleets in those sectors, response times have increased dramatically. So Young continued, they know the humans are gone and they are getting bold. The Devourers had been kept in check for years, primarily through fear of human military efficiency. They were like space bullies who only behaved when someone stronger was watching them. With the humans gone, they were starting to cause trouble. Let the Council handle it, Kehoe said coldly. They wanted to exclude us from important decisions. Let them make this one. But even as he spoke with apparent indifference, Kehoe felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Innocent people were going to suffer across the galaxy, and humanity had always been the species that stepped forward when others could not or would not help. Walking away felt like abandoning everything humans believed in. Dr. Minet seemed to read his thoughts. She activated a holographic communicator, and the image of President Wu Jin appeared in the center of the command room. The president was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that had seen decades of interstellar politics. Ambassador, she began without wasting time, I have been monitoring the situation, the Council's emergency sessions, the system failures, the economic disruption. Are we prepared for the consequences of this withdrawal? Kehoe straightened up and spoke with the formal tone he used for official business. Madam President, humanity tried for 15 years to be a constructive member of the galactic community. We were treated like second-class citizens despite all our contributions. Sometimes walking away is the only way to show people what they are losing. President Wu Jin nodded slowly. I agree with the withdrawal, Kehoe, but we need to be ready for what comes next. Intelligence suggests that multiple hostile factions are preparing to test Council defenses. If the galaxy falls into chaos, innocent species will suffer. Then, perhaps, the Council should have thought about that before dismissing us so casually. Kehoe replied, but his voice carried less conviction than before. The truth was that humanity's moral compass made it very difficult to watch potential suffering without acting. It was both their greatest strength and their biggest weakness. Other species sometimes took advantage of human compassion, but that same compassion also made humans the natural protectors of the galaxy. More reports continued to come in from human intelligence networks across the galaxy. Each report painted a picture of accelerating collapse. The Council's emergency sessions had become permanent, with alien representatives working around the clock as crisis after crisis demanded immediate attention. Commander J1 provided updates on military movements. Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting unusual activity from several hostile factions. The machine consciousness has sent scout ships toward inhabited systems. For the first time in 50 years, the Savage Collective is mobilizing fleets in the Beta Quadrant. The machine consciousness was an ancient artificial intelligence that had once threatened to consume entire star systems. It had been driven into hibernation decades ago, but it took constant vigilance and human military coordination to keep it contained. President Wu Jin's holographic image flickered with concern. How long before these threats become active invasions, she asked. Based on current movement patterns, probably days or weeks at most, So Young replied. They were deterred mainly by human military reputation and quick response capabilities. Without that deterrent, they are becoming bold. The command center fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Multiple existential threats were converging on a galaxy that had just lost its primary defense force. The Council species were about to face enemies they were not equipped to handle. Kehoe looked around at his team of dedicated professionals who had spent their careers keeping the galaxy safe. These were good people who had always put service above personal gain. They had been insulted and excluded, but they were still thinking about how to protect innocent lives. President Wu Jin seemed to sense the mood in the room. Ambassador, I want you to prepare contingency plans for emergency intervention. We may not be part of the Council anymore, but we are still humans. We do not let innocent people die if we can prevent it. Kehoe nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Humanity would maintain its principles even if it meant helping people who had rejected them. That was what made humans different from other species in the galaxy. That was what made them heroes. As the briefing ended and the team dispersed to their duties, Kehoe remained in the command center watching the displays that showed a galaxy in growing chaos. The next few days would determine whether the Council could survive without human help, and whether humanity's conscience would allow them to stand by and watch if everything fell apart. 1 week after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, the carefully maintained peace of the galaxy began falling apart like a house built from cards in a strong wind. The Council's emergency sessions had become a permanent fixture, with alien representatives staying awake around the clock as one disaster after another demanded immediate attention. The first major catastrophe happened in the Andorian sector, where 2 minor alien species called the Korath and Veltani had maintained an uneasy peace for decades. The only thing keeping them from fighting was human peacekeepers who patrolled the border between their territories and mediated their disputes without the human buffer zone. Old territorial arguments reignited with terrifying speed. Both species had been building up weapons and military forces for years, but the presence of human peacekeepers had kept them from using those weapons. Now, with the humans gone, there was nothing to stop them from attacking each other. Ambassador Luray from the peaceful Harmony species delivered the terrible news to the Council chamber. Her normally calm voice shook with emotion as she spoke. The Korath and Veltani have resumed full-scale warfare, she announced. 3 civilian space stations have been completely destroyed. Refugee ships are fleeing the system, carrying millions of innocent people who have lost their homes. Our own peacekeeping forces are completely inadequate for this situation. The painful admission hung in the air like a dark cloud. The Harmony species were natural diplomats who were excellent at talking through problems, but they lacked the military strength. and more importantly, the reputation for decisive action that had made human intervention so effective. Other species were discovering the same thing. General Mortak of the warrior Brutan species slammed his armored fist on his desk in frustration. My forces are spread across 12 different conflicts that have started since the humans left, he growled. We cannot be everywhere at once like they could, but the military disasters were only part of the growing catastrophe. The technological infrastructure that humanity had quietly improved and maintained over 15 years was failing. At an alarming rate, systems that had worked perfectly for years were breaking down without human expertise to maintain Thempiri. The small Pixian ambassador delivered updates that grew more desperate with each passing hour. Communication delays between star systems have increased by 400%, she reported in her high-pitched voice. Our trade coordination networks are completely failing. Ships are arriving at spaceports with no advance warning, causing massive traffic jams and delays. The economic situation was becoming a complete nightmare. Shard Prime from the crystal-like collective species presented financial reports that made even the most optimistic aliens lose hope. Intersystem commerce has dropped by 73% in just 1 week. Food shipments to outer colonies are being delayed by weeks instead of days. We are looking at potential famine on 17 different worlds within the next month. The medical reports from Dr. Velkan were equally devastating. Without human diagnostic systems, medical errors are increasing dramatically across the galaxy. The vaccine production on Kepler 442b has stopped completely without their expertise. We may see a return of diseases we thought were eliminated forever. Perhaps the most terrifying news came from the mysterious shadow species who rarely appeared and even more rarely spoke. One of them materialized just long enough to deliver information that made every representative in the chamber feel sick with fear. The Devourers have begun systematic attacks on outer defense positions. The Savage Collective has resumed expansion activities in the Beta Quadrant. Most concerning, the machine consciousness has awakened from its century-long sleep and is sending scout ships toward populated star systems. The machine consciousness was an ancient artificial intelligence that had once threatened to consume entire galaxies before being driven into hibernation. It had been humanity's research and military coordination that had kept it contained for the past 50 years. Now, without human oversight, it was waking up and preparing to resume its campaign of destruction. The Council Prime, whose ethereal form had been flickering with panic, asked the question everyone was afraid to hear: how long before these threats become active invasions that threaten populated worlds? The shadow representative's response was barely audible through the translation systems. Days, perhaps weeks at most. They were deterred primarily by human military reputation and rapid response capabilities. Without that deterrent, they grow bold and aggressive. The chamber erupted in fearful conversations as aliens realized the full scope of their terrible mistake. Humanity had not just been contributors to the Council, they had been the primary reason the galaxy remained stable and peaceful for so many years more. Reports kept flooding in from across the galaxy. Each one painted a picture of accelerating collapse. The communication networks that connected hundreds of worlds were failing. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades were experiencing massive disruptions. Medical facilities were reporting equipment failures that local technicians could not repair. The Pixian ambassador Pyre brought more bad news about the communication crisis. 25 star systems have now lost all long-range communication capability. Ships are traveling between worlds with no way to coordinate with traffic control or emergency services. It is only a matter of time before we see major accidents. General Mortak announced that his military forces were completely overwhelmed. 5 separate armed conflicts have started in regions where human peacekeepers had been maintaining order. My troops are fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. We are losing ground everywhere. The economic disaster was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Shard Prime delivered updates that showed the true extent of the crisis. Food riots have begun on 6 major space stations. The outer trade network has effectively collapsed completely. Several agricultural worlds are reporting crop failures due to delayed supply deliveries. Dr. Velkan brought medical news that was equally catastrophic. The plague has returned to 3 different worlds that we thought were safe. Kepler 442b is reporting thousands of new cases daily. Without human vaccine production capabilities, we are looking at potential extinction events for several species as the reports continued to pour in. The aliens in the council chamber began to understand something that terrified them more than any external threat. The galaxy had not just been helped by humans, it had become completely dependent on human expertise, competence, and willingness to solve problems that other species could not or would not handle. Ambassador Kehoe's words from 1 week earlier echoed in every representative's mind. When your precious council station was threatened by that asteroid field, who flew dangerous missions to clear the path? The answer had always been humans. They had been the ones to step forward when others stepped back. They had been the ones to find solutions when others found excuses. They had been the ones to take risks when others played it safe. The Valkyrie ambassador, who had initially dismissed humanity as too aggressive, spoke with barely controlled desperation. We must contact the humans immediately, he said, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Offer them whatever they want, full voting rights, preferred trade status, anything they ask for. But the Council Prime's response carried the weight of inevitable doom. What if they refuse? What if we have pushed them too far? What if they decide we deserve whatever happens to us? The question that nobody wanted to answer hung over the chamber like a death sentence. For the first time in galactic history, the Council faced the possibility that their own prejudice and short-sightedness might doom the entire galaxy. The humans had every right to refuse to help. They had every reason to let the galaxy burn after the treatment they had received. As emergency alarms began sounding throughout the station, indicating new crises developing across multiple star systems, the aliens finally understood the true cost of their mistake. They had not just lost valuable allies. They had lost the one species that had made galactic civilization possible. 2 weeks after the human withdrawal, the situation had become worse than anyone's worst nightmares. The Galactic Council chamber, which had once been a symbol of unity and cooperation, now looked like a disaster response center filled with desperate aliens clutching at increasingly impossible solutions. The breaking point came when the Devourers launched their first coordinated assault. 3 outer rim colonies were attacked at exactly the same time, their distress calls echoing through Council communication networks that were barely functioning without human maintenance. The attack was perfectly planned to cause maximum damage and terror. 17 million innocent civilians were trapped on the planet's surfaces while Devourer warships bombarded their cities from orbit. The screams for help could be heard across the galaxy, but there was almost nothing the Council could do to respond quickly enough. General Mortak announced the devastating news with exhaustion clearly visible in his voice. The Kahlo system is under direct assault by a full Devourer battle fleet, he said while his hands shook slightly. 17 million civilians are trapped on 3 different planets. Our nearest response fleet is still 6 hours away from the combat zone. 6 hours in the old days when human coordination and rapid response protocols were in place. Help would have arrived in 90 minutes or less. Every alien representative in the chamber knew this terrible fact. The humans could have saved those people, but the humans were gone. The Council Prime, whose ethereal form had grown much dimmer over the past 2 weeks, asked the question everyone was afraid to hear. How many enemy ships are in the assault fleet? Intelligence reports suggest over 200 Devourer vessels, Mortak replied grimly. Our response fleet consists of 43 ships total. We are completely outgunned and outmaneuvered. The civilians on those planets are going to do the mathematics of destruction. We're simple and absolutely terrifying. Without human military coordination, tactical expertise, and their legendary willingness to charge into impossible battles, the Council's forces were completely inadequate against serious threats like the Devourers. Dr. Velkan delivered medical news that was equally devastating. The plague has returned to Kepler 442b in full force, he announced. Without human vaccine production capabilities, we are looking at the complete extinction of the Keplerian species. They are requesting immediate evacuation of their entire population, but we lack the ships and coordination to move 4 billion people, 4 billion lives hanging in the balance. The Keplerians were a peaceful species who had contributed art, music, and philosophy to galactic culture for centuries. Now they faced extinction because the Council had rejected the one species. Capable of saving them, the economic collapse was accelerating beyond all predictions. Shard Prime delivered reports that painted a picture of complete system failure. 12 agricultural worlds are reporting total crop failures due to delayed supply chain deliveries. Food riots have started on 6 major space stations. The entire Outer Rim trade network has collapsed completely. The Pixian ambassador added more technical disasters to the growing list. Long-range sensors have detected massive system failures across the galaxy. Communication networks are failing faster than we can repair them. Navigation systems are producing incorrect data, causing ships to get lost in space. But the news that finally broke everyone's remaining hope came from the shadow species. One of them materialized with the most terrifying intelligence report in galactic history: machine consciousness. Fleet has awakened. Completely estimated total force over 1,000 vessels of various sizes. They will begin systematic planet consumption operations within 72 hours without human defensive coordination. Galaxy-wide extinction is mathematically probable. The words hit the chamber like a death sentence. 1,000 machine consciousness vessels against a fragmented, poorly coordinated Council defense force that was already failing against much smaller threats. It was not just defeat they were facing, it was the complete end of galactic civilization. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the full implications sank in. The machine consciousness did not just conquer planets like other hostile species, it consumed them completely, turning entire worlds into raw materials for building more ships and weapons. Once it started the consumption process, there would be nothing left of the civilizations that had taken millions of years to develop. Finally, the inevitable decision was made. The same Valkyrie ambassador who had dismissed humanity as too aggressive just 2 weeks earlier stood up with visible difficulty. His earlier confidence and arrogance had been completely replaced by desperate necessity. I formally propose an emergency delegation to human space, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of species-wide panic. We must ask them to return. We must beg them if necessary. The word beg sent shock waves through the chamber. In galactic politics, species negotiated, bargained, and made deals. They did not beg. But the reality of their situation had stripped away all pretense and pride. The Council was facing complete annihilation, and everyone knew it. The Council Prime nodded slowly, their ethereal form flickering with desperation. Who will lead this delegation? Who can we send that might convince the humans to forgive our terrible mistake? The question revealed just how hopeless their situation had become. Most of the ambassadors had either directly insulted humanity or remained silent while others did the insulting. Their credibility with the human government was absolutely zero. Ambassador Lyrae from the Diplomatic Harmony species volunteered, despite knowing how futile it probably was. I will go, she said quietly, though I fear our chances of success are very small. The humans have every right to refuse us. Dr. Velcon agreed to join the desperate mission. I will come with you. Perhaps medical necessity will carry more weight than political apologies we can show them. The suffering that will happen if they do not return. Even Shard Prime agreed to participate, bringing economic data that might demonstrate the true scope of the crisis. The humans always responded well to logical arguments and clear data. Perhaps cold numbers will succeed where emotional appeals might fail. But as the delegation prepared to leave for human space, yet another crisis emerged. The shadow species materialized with their most dire warning. Yet machine consciousness advance fleet has begun final approach to inhabited systems. First planet consumption will begin within 48 hours. Main fleet arrival estimated at 72 hours. Galaxy-wide defensive coordination must begin immediately or total extinction becomes inevitable. The words were like a final countdown to the end of everything. 48 hours before the machine consciousness began turning populated worlds into raw materials. 72 hours before the main fleet arrived to finish what the advance ships started. The Council Prime asked the question that everyone was thinking: how long will it take to reach human space? And get a response: 18 hours to reach their territory. Lyrae replied, if they agree to immediate assistance and mobilize every available ship, we might have enough time. And if they refuse? The Council Prime asked, though everyone already knew the answer. Nobody replied, because there was no point. The aliens all understood that humanity had every right to refuse every Reason to let the galaxy burn after being treated so badly. The only hope was that human nature, their legendary inability to ignore suffering even when they had been wronged, would overcome their completely justified anger as the emergency delegation, prepared to depart. Every alien representative in the chamber understood they were not just carrying an apology or a request for help. They were carrying the last desperate hope of galactic civilization itself if the humans said no everything, and everyone they had ever known would cease to exist within days. The delegation ship launched from the council station carrying 3 terrified aliens toward human space, racing against time itself, hoping that the species they had rejected and insulted would somehow find it in their hearts to save the galaxy that had treated them so poorly. Behind them, the council chamber continued its permanent emergency session as more and more star systems reported the approach of machine consciousness scout ships. The countdown to extinction had begun and only humanity could stop it. The alien delegation ship approached New Geneva Station 18 hours after leaving council space. The journey had been dangerous because hostile forces now controlled large areas that had once been safe. The massive human station looked exactly the same as always, but somehow it felt different now. It represented the last hope for galactic survival. Ambassador Lyrae stared through the ship's window at the human station, noting its clean, efficient design and the defensive capabilities that had always been there but somehow overlooked. The humans had never tried to show off their military strength, but it was obvious to anyone who really looked inside the station's main meeting room. Ambassador Kehoe waited with President Wu Jin, General Taejin, and Dr. Minnie. The humans looked calm and professional, showing no anger or bitterness despite everything that had happened. Their faces showed the same steady competence that had characterized their species throughout their 15 years of service to the galaxy. Ambassador Kehoe greeted the delegation formally as they entered the room. Ambassador Lyrae, Dr. Velkan Shard Prime, you have traveled a long way through dangerous territory to reach us. The greeting was polite, but not particularly warm. The humans were being diplomatic, but they were not pretending that everything was fine between their species and the council. Lyrae's usual diplomatic composure cracked immediately. Ambassador Kehoe, President Wu Jin, she began with her voice shaking, we do not come as official representatives of the council. We come as desperate beings begging for the survival of our species and everyone else in the galaxy. The directness was shocking. Galactic politics normally involved layers of careful protocol and diplomatic language, but there was no time for such things now. Every minute that passed brought the machine consciousness closer to beginning its planet consumption operations. Dr. Velkan stepped forward with his medical scanner displaying data that showed the scope of suffering across the galaxy. A plague on Kepler 442b has already killed over 3 million innocent beings in the past week, he said urgently. Without human vaccine expertise, the entire Keplerian species will be extinct within 2 weeks. Hard Prime activated holographic displays that filled the room with economic projections showing complete systemic collapse. 17 agricultural worlds are facing total crop failure, he announced. Food riots have begun on 37 space stations. The economic breakdown is accelerating beyond our ability to control or stop it. But it was Ambassador Lyrae who delivered the news that changed everything in the room. The machine consciousness fleet has fully awakened, she said with barely controlled terror. Over 1,000 vessels are beginning systematic planet consumption operations. Our defensive capabilities are completely inadequate. We estimate 48 hours before inhabited worlds begin to die. President Wu Jin exchanged meaningful glances with her advisors. The machine consciousness represented a threat that went far beyond politics and hurt feelings. It was an extinction-level crisis that would eventually consume human space as well, regardless of their current isolation from the council. How long before the machine consciousness reaches inhabited systems? General Taejin asked, his military mind already working on response scenarios and tactical calculations. 48 hours to the first outer colonies, Lyrae replied with desperation clear in her voice. Perhaps 1 week before they reached the core worlds where billions of people lived. Dr. Minnie spoke for the first time since the delegation had arrived. The vaccine production for Kepler 442b requires a very specific manufacturing process that takes at least 72 hours. she said slowly. Even if we started immediately right now, some of the Keplerian people could still be saved. Dr. Velkan interrupted desperately. Please, we know we do not deserve your help after how we treated you, but the innocent people dying across the galaxy deserve to live. The room fell completely silent as the weight of moral responsibility settled over everyone present. This was the moment that would define not just humanity's relationship with the rest of the galaxy, but their own understanding of who they were as a species. President Wu Jin stood slowly, and her decision carried the full authority of her office and the conscience of the human people. Dr. Minay, she said clearly, how quickly can we mobilize our medical teams to help? Kepler-442b 6 hours, Minay replied immediately, and the relief in her voice was obvious to everyone in the room. General Taejin, what would we need to coordinate an effective defense against the machine consciousness? The president continued. The general consulted his tactical displays quickly. Full military mobilization, complete tactical coordination with all available council forces, and approximately 18 hours to position our fleets in the most effective defensive formation. Skiho looked directly at the alien delegation with steady eyes. The question is not whether humanity can help, he said firmly. We can help, and we will help because that is who we are as a species. The real question is whether the galactic community is finally ready to treat us as equal partners rather than convenient tools to be used. And discardedly Ray's response was immediate and completely heartfelt. Full council membership with complete voting rights and equal representation in all major decisions. Whatever requirements you have, we will meet them. Shard Prime added his voice to the promises. Preferred trade status, priority access to rare resources, economic partnerships that benefit humanity. First, we will give you everything you ask for, but it was Dr. Velkan who made the offer that truly mattered to the humans. Formal recognition of humanity as the galaxy's primary peacekeeping and crisis response force, he said. No more questioning your methods or motivations, no more treating you like children who need supervision. President Wu Jin nodded slowly with satisfaction. Then we have a formal agreement, she announced. But you must understand this. Humanity will never again be taken for granted. We are partners in this galaxy, not servants within. Just a few hours, the galaxy witnessed something that had never happened before. Human fleets that had withdrawn from council space returned with speed and efficiency that reminded everyone exactly why they had been so desperately missed. Medical teams rushed toward plague-stricken worlds, while military forces began coordinating a defense against the machine consciousness that used every available ship from every council species. The preparation for battle took place with incredible speed and coordination. Human tactical officers worked with alien military leaders to create defensive formations that maximized each species' unique strengths. The humans provided the coordination and strategic planning, while the other species contributed their ships' weapons and specialized capabilities. The battle for galactic survival lasted 3 full days and nights. Human tactical coordination combined with the diverse military capabilities of all council species working together in perfect harmony achieved what had seemed completely impossible. Just days before, the machine consciousness fleet was not just defeated but entirely destroyed, with their threat eliminated for many generations to come. During the fighting, human medical teams worked around the clock to save the plague victims on Kepler-442b. Their advanced vaccine production capabilities combined with alien manufacturing resources managed to halt the disease spread and begin the long process of healing an entire world. The economic recovery began even before the military victory was complete. Human shipping companies resumed operations with alien partners, creating new trade routes that were more efficient and profitable than anything that had existed before. The galaxy's economy not only recovered but became stronger than it had ever been in the aftermath of the crisis, as rescue operations saved billions of lives and restored peace and order to hundreds of worlds. The galaxy finally understood what they had tried to throw away. Humanity was not just another species seeking advantage in the galactic community. They were the moral compass that pointed toward hope. Even in the darkest times, they were the steady hand that maintained peace and the beating heart that kept civilization alive and growing. The new galactic accord signed in the rebuilt council chambers established humanity not just as equal,